Swamp Thing is arguably DC's best TV show they've ever put out. Before the show started, I was already incredibly excited to see how the character of Swamp Thing would be brought to life, and to see how DC would portray him. After watching Titans and Doom Patrol, I was very intrigued to see how DC Universe would portray a dark horror show with romance also being in there, and I gotta say they've done a perfect job at it. Alec Holland is a scientist who was hired by Avery Sunderland and then fired. After Alec was fired, he kept working on the swamp and made it clear that he wouldn't stop. Avery decided to get Matt to shoot and kill Alec, thus turning him into Swamp Thing.
Can I help?
Throughout the first season, we get to see the transition from Alec being Alec to becoming Swamp Thing and learning about the Green, the Rot, and his powers as the Guardian of the Green. Over this season, we get to see Alec struggle to understand his new body and what it means to be the protector of the swamp. By the end of this season, we see that him and Abby are ready to face the evil that is out there in the swamp.
How's that sound?
I would like that very much.
Abby Arcane is a CDC doctor who returns home to find a deadly virus that has come from the swamp. She meets Alec Holland and has a surprising bond with him, only to have Alec be taken from her in the first episode by Matt. Throughout this season, we get to see this show in Abby's perspective, and we also get to learn about her past to Murray. Over the season, we get to see her relationship with Alec Holland grow as she tries to cure him from his condition, which it is revealed in the second last episode that the real Alec Holland is dead and that Swamp Thing only has Alec's memories and consciousness. Avery Sunderland is the main villain of the first season, and he's a corrupt businessman who is determined to harness the power of the swamp for himself.
Don't touch it. You could contaminate this specimen.
There has been multiple times where Avery has shown that he is a villain. In the last episode of the show, he stabbed Lucilia and led her to drown in a car. He killed a person who told him that he had to pay back a loan, and he orchestrated the death of Alec Holland.
Can I help?
Throughout the show, we've seen that Avery doesn't really care for anyone else, and if he does and they stand in his way, he'll get rid of them. An example of this is Maria, his wife. She went behind Avery's back and sent men in to capture Swamp Thing and also tried to have him killed. After Avery found out about this, he sent Maria off to an insane asylum. Jason Woodrue is a scientist hired by Avery Sunderland, and then at the end of season 1 we get to see that he was turned into the Florenic Man.
Alec Holland so desperately wanted to be human again. When the alternative is infinitely more intriguing.
What are you?
Throughout the season, we see Jason Woodrue become obsessed with the swamp and how it could be the key for diseases and how it could be used to help his wife with her Alzheimer's. We have seen Jason Woodrue have interactions with characters such as Abby Arcane, Avery Sunderland, Alec Holland / Swamp Thing, Maria Sunderland, and many more. In the last episode of the season, we see Jason eat a part of Swamp Thing, and this causes him to turn into the villain Florenic Man. The romance on the show is very interesting, as it is with Abby Arcane and Alec Holland / Swamp Thing. Over the season we get to see their relationship grow. We've seen Swamp Thing save Abby multiple times. One time in particular is when Abby got the rot in her system and then Swamp Thing saved her by putting a plant in her and growing it from the outside.
Hold on. There's 200 species of flora inside your body. If I can coax them all to grow, to heal.
Another time is when the rot got in her system in episode 4 and Swamp Thing takes the rot into his system and fights it off. One scene in episode 7 shows that Alec Holland / Swamp Thing cares for Avery by telling her that she has to stay away from him and the swamp for her own safety. This obviously doesn't last long, as you can see in the last episode of the season that Swamp Thing and Abby are sitting down at his lab in the swamp talking about the darkness.
How's that sound?
I would like that very much.
The horror on the show is interesting because it isn't really horror. You have a few jump scares, but overall the show is just dark and gritty. Most scenes are set at nighttime and it's a bit creepy, but it isn't really scary or anything.
This is bad. I think we should leave.
There is a scene in episode 1 which is a jump scare. In this scene you can see it's clearly meant to be a jump scare. There is a scene in episode 5 where Abby sees Shauna, and this scene, in this case, it isn't really meant to be a jump scare, but it's meant to be dark and just overall creepy.
Save me, Abby. Save me. What do you want from me?
Swamp Thing overall was able to do horror in such a different way, and I love it for that. The show wasn't saturated in horror, which is what I was expecting from when they announced the show. They had a perfect balance of creepy and dark, which is something I was a massive fan of. What I mean about this being a character-driven show is that you can't take one character and replace them with another character. You can't take out Abby Arcane from the story and replace her with Harley Quinn, or you can't take out Alec Holland and replace him with someone like Batman. It just can't happen. For the plot of the show, you need a certain character to further the story, and a lot of the time this is Abby Arcane. Without her, you wouldn't be able to have the Abby Swamp Thing relationship, you wouldn't be able to have the Avery and Maria Sunderland relationship, Matt wouldn't really matter if it wasn't for Abby, you couldn't do the Shauna storyline without Abby, and everything just revolves back to her, so you can't take her out of the equation. Swamp Thing got cancelled after one season. It was revealed 6 days after the first episode was released, and the reason they gave for why the show had to be cancelled was just dumb. One of the reasons why it had to be cancelled was because investors didn't like the genre of the show and wanted it to be more like Titans, which is just not a good thing. Another reason was because the tax in North Carolina was too high. Now, there was a way to get more money to pay the tax, and that would have been to release DC Universe internationally. DC Universe would make so much more money if they released internationally, and they would have been able to continue making Swamp Thing, and even if they couldn't film anymore in North Carolina, they could have moved to somewhere in Florida because they have a lot of swamps and it's cheaper. One of the main things I love about this show is how DC were able to put such an unpopular character into a show and have the show be really good. Every show that has been released with DC Universe has been so different to the others. We have Titans, which is dark and gritty, Doom Patrol, which is just a masterpiece in itself for it being lighthearted and just overall insanely dumb to the point where it's amazing, and then you've Swamp Thing, which is just an amazing show. DC were able to make a green swamp character popular by him just having his own show, and I gotta say, Swamp Thing has become my second favorite superhero. I would like to thank everyone who has clicked on this video and either clicked for a second or has watched up until this point. It means a massive deal to me. If you did enjoy the video, you can subscribe for more video essays weekly, leave a like to show some support, and comment if you have a question or video suggestion. I would also like to ask, what did you think of Swamp Thing?